back and forth. Let me see here. Okay, and those that are participating virtually, if we're not loud enough, please let us know so we can raise our voice. Okay, you're ready.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Water Planning Group meeting. My name is Omar Martinez. I am subbing in for my forever boss, Mr. Reyes, who couldn't join us today. Also, our vice chair, Scott Ryder, couldn't join us. Our secretary, Ms. Adams, also couldn't join us. So I was volunteered to fill in this role, and I'm happy to do so. And so, welcome, everybody. Do we have any guests that we normally don't have here?
Oh, Mr. Barker, right there.
Welcome, Mr.
Right. Yes.
I didn't want you to sit there. She insisted.
Well, they wanted somebody good looking to sit beside you. Are you on the all-star staff now?
Yeah.
Awesome. And so, in terms of guests, we have Alderman Cancun in the back, representing the study. And then we have COG staff, there's water board staff, and then
Mr. Davis from the Fairmont.
welcome.
And Rachel. And Rachel. And
Okay.
then Mr. Long.
Mr. Longer. See you all. And then for my BWC, we got over there. Okay. So,
Let me just verify. Everybody virtually, you can hear us correctly? I mean, is that correct? Do we have thumbs up?
Uh-oh.
It's fuzzy.
Okay, we'll raise our voice.
okay, I'll yell. So anybody from online joining us that is not part of the voting membership or the voting membership? Any guests?
We can't really understand Omar very well. I'm sorry. It's too fuzzy and it's too, so sorry. It's very hard to hear the speaker.
You're right there, but we're moving over.
Okay, can you hear me a lot? Oh, do we drop the call? Oh, this is a fancy MSI. Look at this. It's a gaming computer. Just that one of these. How are you doing?
Yeah. I can hear you much better. Can't see you now, but I can hear you much better.
Okay, are we ready to keep going?
As soon as I can get the.
Okay, sorry about that. So in summary, I'm subbing in as chair for my boss, Chuy Reyes. And so we are currently in agenda item number 2. We're recognizing all of the guests that are here with us at Lower Valley Water District. And I was asking if there's anybody online that is also a guest that would like to introduce themselves. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item number 3. Review and approve the minutes for the general committee meeting held on June 28, 2022.
Well, since I'm there virtually and I hear no objections, I move to approve the minutes as presented.
Okay, with the first and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes. Agenda item number 4. This is for Mr. Reinert. Update on Regional Water Planning Group Chair's conference call. Since he's not here today, somebody from Texas Water Development Board, can you all give us an update on what might have happened in that meeting? Yeah. If you'll sit here, please.
Sure. Sit here.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Lee. I'm with the Texas Water Development Board manager at the Regional Water Planning Program. I'm just joining today with Heather, one of our newer team members. I usually run the chair's conference calls. I was not able to the last time, but we did hold one in December of just last year. And so we touched on some of the things that you'll hear from Heather and Katie today, so I won't go over everything, but we did touch on letting all the chairs know that we have a agency legislative priorities report that included a request for an additional $1.3 million in annual appropriations that would be going to regional water planning groups if that ends up getting approved by the legislature. And then that report was posted on our website, so that was available for public viewing for those that were interested. We talked about how the Sunset Advisory Commission report directed the Water Development Board to coordinate with the state climatologist to provide data to regional planning groups. So we have begun coordinating with the state climatologist, and we will be providing more updates to planning groups on that and what data will be available based on that effort later this year. And then we also talked through what needs to occur later this year in the planning process prior to the technical memorandum. So Heather will be kind of covering some of that later in her presentation. And then, let's see, Katie Dalberg, who's the manager of projections and socioeconomic analysis team, also gave a presentation to all the chairs on the population and municipal demand projections, and she'll be presenting to you all later today as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for Heather? Hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 5. Discuss and approve officers, chair, vice chair, secretary, and 2 at-large members for the Far West Texas Water Planning Group.
Chairman, can we move to actually agenda item 7?
Sure thing.
We'll do that one first, if that's okay.
So agenda item number 7, resignations from existing members and appointees who will fulfill their terms.
Just bring up that item.
Retirement is beckoning, huh?
All right, sorry, folks, just bear with me, I'm just gonna pull this one up. Okay, if you all can see, what we have is Mr. Davis, who is currently serving as our chair. He, after discussion, I had a discussion with him verbally, and he requested to resign from the position. Now, in our bylaws, we do have the provision that will allow for his alternate to become a permanent member of the Far West Texas Water Planning Group. And so his alternate is Omar Martinez, and Omar has specified that he is willing to serve in that position. The other individual that we have who is also resigning is Janet Adams, and we have her alternate as Summer Webb. And Summer Webb, who's also on the call right now, has offered to fill in that position as well. So I would be asking for the group's approval at this moment through a motion to allow these individuals to serve as permanent members of the Far West Texas Water Planning Group.
I'm so moved.
Okay, so we've got Randy Barker and Jeff Bennett, okay? Great, thank you. Okay, so then we can go back to, let's go ahead and go on to agenda item 5 then, where you were, Chairman Martinez, so we can talk about officers. Oh, we have Albert Miller. Hello, Commissioner Miller, have a seat.
Welcome, sir.
Albert, over here. Albert, over here. I want the good guys now. I didn't do anything wrong. How you doing, Albert? Good to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
Did you go down to the water district office too?
No,
No.
I just got held up.
You're the only one. You were down there, dude.
I just got held up.
Okay, recognizing Mr. Albert Miller, Commissioner Miller, to,
Well, no,
For
no
quorum
longer
purposes.
commissioner. I got beat.
well, you're forever a Commissioner for us. So going back to agenda item number 5, discuss and approve members, chair, vice chair, secretary, and 2 at-large members for the Far West Texas Water Planning Group. And this is the executive committee, right, isn't it?
The executive committee and officers, yes, sir.
Okay.
So as I'm pulling up the screen, screen right now. Currently, we have, as members, let's see if it comes up. A little bit lagging, so I'll just go ahead and inform everyone verbally for those who are participating virtually. We have Chairman Reyes as the chair for the Far West Texas Water Planning Group. We have Scott Reiner as the vice chairman. We have Janet Adams as the secretary. Dave Paul as the executive committee member, as well as Teresa Todd. And then we also have Becky Brewster as the alternate executive committee member. Obviously, with Ms. Adams and Mr. Reyes coming off, those positions will need to be filled. And in terms of continued interest, both Mr. Paul and Teresa is having problems. I don't know if she's been able to get back on or not, but she has expressed interest as well in serving in that capacity, as well as Becky Brewster. And so at this point, we would need a motion for these positions to be filled. And I just wanted to inform the group that Mr. Runner did say that if he were considered for the position as chairman, that he would serve in that capacity if that was considered. So we'll need from the floor a motion to appoint these positions. I don't know if there's any questions from any of the members virtually, as well as in person that I can answer.
I have a motion. Again, Dave Paul has done an awful lot of work on this group, and I've been on it, 17 years or something like that. And I'd like to suggest this for our officer. I think Scott Reiner should be appointed chairman. I'd like to suggest Dave Paul be appointed vice chairman. Teresa Todd be moved up to secretary. And Becky Brewster moved up to one of the executive committee members. And then we have an opening for another executive committee member, which I would just leave open to the group. That's my recommendation.
Are you interested in that position?
Of course, yes.
I'll second it.
And I know that Teresa cannot participate as a member, but she can hear as part of, Teresa, can you hear us? Okay, and you're not able to get on the audio, right? Okay, so you're not officially participating in the meeting right now since you're not on camera, but just to inform you, we are on the agenda for the officers, and Mr. Etzel has recommended that Scott Brennan serve as the chair, Dave Hall as the vice chair, Teresa Todd as secretary, and Becky Brewster as executive committee member, and then Omar Martinez as the other executive committee member. Now, in terms of parliamentary rules, I don't know if you would want to, we have public comments to identify on the agenda. If you would want to make a comment, since you're not on the roster right now in terms of participating in the meeting, as per the Open Meetings Act. In case you had anything you wanted to say?
No, I think that's exactly right. I don't know.
No offense, no worries.
So Scott's not here today.
I'm just glad to be part of it.
So we'll inform Scott of the information. But he did say that he was interested in serving in that position.
One thing that I did well, I left the irrigation district when I'm at the city of El Paso.
Earliest Friday, he did say that he was interested in the position.
I'm in the economic development of the city. One thing I wanted to follow up with you is watershed.
Let me ask virtually, folks, virtually, anybody? Is there any comments before we move? Series?
Well, I'm just noting that there's competing conversations. You were talking with Teresa and then a couple other people were also talking. And so I'm a little bit in the dark.
Sorry. No, you're okay. So Teresa Todd was just voicing concern whether this was a position that Scott would want to take on. And I was informing her that he did let me know that he was interested in the position. Okay, sorry about that. So we do have a motion, Chairman Martinez?
Okay.
Okay. Not to offend Omar, but he's been an alternate, and I think we should try to put somebody that's been on the board already. So my recommendation is have Dave be an alternate also, and maybe I would recommend Summer Webb come in as an alternate, and then do as he said, Scott, and then maybe Dave Hall, and then Teresa Todd.
And then Becky.
Not to offend you.
No worries. No, we're not offended at all.
Since you're just now moving up from an alternate to the board, you know what I'm saying?
Would you want to amend your motion then?
I'll amend my motion, and rather than the alternate, we've talked about Summer Webb being the alternate executive.
Yes.
And then I'll stand for election as executive committee member along with Becky. So it would be Becky and myself as executive committee members, and then Summer would be the alternate.
Yes.
And then Teresa Todd as secretary, Dave Hall as vice chairman, and Scott as chairman.
Okay, and then do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Okay, first and second, any further discussion? Can you explain to them the recommendation?
Yes, just real quick, virtual world, this is a reminder, Mr. Etzel did revise his motion. He amended it where the chair would be Scott Reiner, the vice chair would be Dave Hall, secretary would be Teresa Todd, executive committee member would be Becky Brewster and Dave Etzel, and the alternate executive committee member would be Summer Webb. And so when we vote, can everybody take their, unmute their mics so that way they can say yes or no?
Okay, ready to go. Okay, all in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody? Aye. Okay, motion passes. Since we now have executive committee members, you want to pass on the?
Well, we don't have, unless Dave wants to take over the meeting.
I don't.
Okay,
Not today.
Omar will continue. Let's go, Omar.
Yes.
Thank you.
Omar's doing a great job.
Effective the next meeting.
Okay.
Because we don't have, really, there's no one in there.
So,
So Wellington then.
Ronald did item 6.
Okay.
Now, the other thing real quick though,
Mentally not prepared.
oh, I'm just leaving. What we could do, okay. Yeah, we'll keep going.
Okay, agenda item number 6, terms for all existing voting members, 3-year terms.
Yes, so I have not done a good job in identifying our 3-year term. So we're gonna draw straws right now in terms of identifying whether you're coming off in 25 or 26. So if I can have everybody just pick.
One thing I just pick 26.
No, pick it. Pick whichever one.
They're all the same color.
No, so. All right.
Oh, no, they're in the low.
Yes. Okay. Whatever one you want. Don't you? Give me one. Okay. With your. Butchering your name.
That's good.
Omar. Okay. You're non-voting.
This is adorable. It's adorable, right? Oh, January 1st too. I'm part of the short list.
Participating virtually, I'll draw yours so that we all know what your years are. Okay, so everybody just hold on to your your slips, and I'll come back, I'll come around and get your terms. But this is just a procedural matter so we can know what years everybody's going to be serving for their 3-year terms. So that'll conclude number 6.
Okay. Moving on to agenda item number 8, notification existing vacancies to all required parties.
Okay. Let me work really hard to get this up because I want feedback from everyone on this item. So there are currently 2 positions there's 3 positions that are vacant. And the bylaws don't state exclusively how many members need to be on each of these industry categories. So I just want to make you all aware of what's existing so you all can determine whether you want to include any additional members, or what your preference is. So let me go ahead and share that with you.
And then I have a question. Bill Finn here, I don't see him on our composition chart. Wouldn't that be a river authority?
Well, he's a non-voting member.
Oh, you're a non-voting member. Oh, okay, I got you.
But, well, you know, that's just how these things go. This is not working. Can't bring it up right now. Let's see. So for those who are in person, you can see on your agenda item all of the positions that we have. I'll make mention to the other folks what it is that we're looking at. There we go. Okay. I think it's going to come up. Okay, here we go. So on this one, you'll just notice at the very bottom, in terms of the vacancies, we do have River Authority, and we also have utilities. Now, unfortunately, I just found out this morning that Mr. Johnson, who was appointed just this past summer, he passed away, and so that position is open as well. So we currently have, and Mr. Johnson was formerly the mayor of Alpine some time ago, as well as a city council member, and was a small business owner. So we have tourism, we have river authorities, we have generating utilities, and we have economic development. Now, you all can stay with your 20 members, or you can add to that. And I color-coded it to show what the representation is right now, how many we have on public, how many we have on counties, municipalities, industries, agriculture, environmental, small business, water districts, water utilities, groundwater management areas, and then we have the others, which are the tourism, real estate, river authorities, generating utilities, and economic development. So I'm asking what the preference is from the water planning group, if there are any other members to add in terms of the interest categories that we still have available, or if you would want to make another position available through the other categories as well, because that's within your purview.
Can I ask a question?
Summer?
Yeah, so Omar and I, do we just immediately step into the roles that were, so like I step in as under water utilities and Omar steps in under water districts, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So Omar can stay under water districts?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I be water utilities if I don't work for a water utility? Or is it?
Yes, so, real quick, hold on, Randy. So the question from Summer, and this is how I understand it, just as we utilize it for flood planning as well, as long as you have knowledge of that interest category, that provides you the justification for being able to serve in that position.
They have an engineer, or had an engineer by the name of Jay Foster.
Jay Ornelas, yeah.
And he became the general manager.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Is there any way we can get him on this?
Mr. Ornelas? No, I mean, you're more than welcome, but you need to ask, you need to go under the interest category as opposed to the person. So if you want to, if you all say that you need another, water district, then that's within your purview. Or if you want one of the other interest categories, you can do that as well. So we're at 20.
He's also a farmer, so back in the flip planning group, he served under agriculture as well.
Well, I'm just asking because,
It makes sense.
yeah.
Would you all, so then I would ask for you all to give me guidance on whether we want to fill the last three, or if we want to add a water district in lieu of one of those. Because you also don't have a cap in terms of how many members you can have on the planning group.
Being that this is the Far West Texas Water Planning Group, water district would be well represented by somebody.
And it's a big, a valuable part of this area, that district. What do you think on that?
That Mr. Ornelas should be part of this group? Yeah, if he's willing to accept the invite, I think he should be made a member.
We already have you, so he will be in addition to it.
That's fine. I can also switch over to economic development. That's also a good fit for me.
Okay, so then, do we have any, is there a motion then to allow me to fill one of these vacancies and go through the requirements of the bylaws in terms of notification?
I'll make that.
And that motion approves the composition that you presented us today, right?
It will be to only put out in terms of a notice a vacancy for water district.
For
Just
water districts.
Unless you all want
I
generating.
think we should put out notices for tourism, river authority, electric generating, and economic development too,
So we'll do those three plus water district.
plus water district. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, what did you say about who was taking Terry Johnson's place as tourism?
We don't have, he wasn't even able to come to one meeting. So.
I know, okay.
Okay, with the first and second, any further discussion? Are we ready to move forward? Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Statute and water development board rules actually do require each planning group to maintain representation for river authority and electric utility. Okay, you don't need the actively.
So then they did right, like you said. I was getting ready to forego. So, okay, we'll keep those on there.
Okay, with that amended, any further discussion? All in favor indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. And then agenda item number 9, consideration of fiscal year 23-24 Far West Texas Water Planning Group membership dues. Annette?
Yes, sir. In your packet, you will see the breakout of the budget. And on the budget, the total request is for $63,692, and that would be the membership dues would be assessed to each of these entities that you see on the worksheet. And we are using the 2030 population numbers to make that determination. And this is similar to what we've been doing in previous years in terms of how we come up with the formula. And as you can see on that worksheet, the entity that is paying the most is El Paso Water, which has the largest population base. So are there any questions for me pertaining to this item? If I do get approval for this agenda item, I will proceed with sending out agreements for for 2 years for the remaining part of this fiscal year plus 24. And as you can see, everyone is population based in terms of the color coding, but at the bottom are underground water districts and groundwater districts are capped at $300 with El Paso County Water Improvement District at $2,500. So the total request again is $63,692. And if approved, then I will go ahead and send out those agreements.
Are these similar to last year's and the year before that assessments?
Yes,
Everyone paid current?
yes. Thankfully, it's a little bit difficult at times. Now, what I will make mention that I still continue to put Horizon Mud in the formula. They have not participated in the last several years, but Horizon City picked up the membership cost. And I will, if Horizon Mud again is not interested, then I will reach out to their Economic Development Corporation. Yes, sir.
Why are some going?
Yes, so the smaller entities are being covered by the county. So for instance, in Brewster, we've got Marathon, Laditas, and Studio View. All those costs are being recognized with Brewster County other. So they're picking up the cost.
That's a good question. I was wondering the same thing.
Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
El Paso County is covering some of this under the county other El Paso?
Yes, El Paso County, I have them covering East Montana, Latuna, Hacienda, Paseo, and Fort Bliss.
Okay, and they've always been good at it? With it?
This will be something new that I show them because the previously it was assessed to El Paso Water.
Got it.
Now, having been covered by El Paso County, do they have representatives that can come to the table?
Yes, we do send out the notification, so El Paso County is welcome to attend.
The other, water districts.
Yes, the other water districts as well.
Okay, any further questions? Entertain a motion to approve?
Motion for approval.
Do we have a second? Mr. Barker, second. The first and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes. Item number 10, consider certification of administrative expenses to be submitted to the Texas Water Development Board for reimbursement for the 2026 regional planning cycle.
There's no action on that item. We're going to keep it on there for future meetings, but we don't have anything to report back to Water Development Board. I think that's Teresa's.
So should we table that?
I'm sorry?
You want to table that?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Motion to table.
do we have a second? Mr. Barker? All in favor indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes. Item number 11, Texas Water Development Board updates.
Okay, so let me bring up.
While I bring that up, let me introduce myself. Hi, y'all, I'm Brooke Rose, I'm the new Elizabeth at the board.
The news.
The new Elizabeth. Heather, like the flower, Rose like the flower, so my email's pretty easy, heather.rose@twd.texas.gov. And before this position, I was still at the board in the Office of Water Science and Conservation, helping them with their legislative review, bill review, and reports on legislative items of interest to the board. Before that, I worked for the Lower Colorado River Authority as a water conservation coordinator, so it helps with their municipal conservation programs and their ag conservation programs. I worked with some rice farmers in Barber District. And really happy to be here to help you all with planning for the 2026 cycle. And whenever my presentation's all pulled up, I'll give you some updates on what we've been doing at the board and what to expect for the 2026 cycle. Before I start, I want to make sure everyone can hear me online. Can I get a thumbs up if I'm loud enough? All right, we got thumbs up. And baby's on board, great. Thanks, baby. Right, it's coming in now. Sorry for it.
No worries. All right, so since your all's last meeting, we amended the regional water planning contracts to incorporate the full scope of work, total study costs for the cycle, and updated contract costs guidance documents. And these documents are available online on the Sixth Cycle website. So currently, the total cost for the study is $434,544, and the current committed cost is about $260,000. Moving on to the Interregional Planning Council. So they had their last meeting on March 9th, and they're planning to meet again in May-ish is kind of the tentative date, but we did send out a doodle poll to try to gauge what's everyone's best availability. So if you can fill out that doodle poll, please do. A little bit about the council. The council was created to improve coordination among regional water planning groups and between the board and in meeting goals of the state water planning process. It's to facilitate dialogue regarding regional water management strategies and to share operational best practices in regional water planning process. Each council is required to have at least one public meeting, which they've already done, and to prepare a report on council's work. So Region E's current members are Scott Reinert with David Etzold as the alternate. And Inter-Regional Planning Council so far has been discussing recommendations that the previous council had come up with, and some of these include working with the legislature for additional funding on interregional coordination and providing financial incentives for local sponsorship of a project, working with the ledge on updating open meetings requirements. So those are some bills that have been filed, and some of them are moving, and there may be changes, but we'll let you all know as we learn more. And then new member orientation and several other recommendations from the council. All this is available in the meeting materials from that March 9th meeting, which is available on that website link or up behind me. Planning on having at least 2 meetings, and there are virtual options, so feel free to join virtually, and we'd love to see you at the next meeting. All right, next slide, please. We have some new educational materials available online. We have updated regional water planning member guide, which provides an overview of the regional water planning group member roles and responsibility and the regional water planning process. The administrative guidance document has also been updated for regional water planning group sponsors, which provides best practices for regional water planning group sponsors. And then we have several one-pagers, which are great kind of one-page info docs on several topics, but specifically drought of record and our water supply and flood mitigation strategies and obtaining consistency waivers. Next slide, please. Yeah. So we're going to go into a deep dive on this in just a minute with Kate Dahlberg, who's online, but we have some updated dates for projections data. So right now we're in the process of the planning process of looking at our projections data for non-municipal and municipal. And we currently have draft projections for non-municipal and municipal demand. WSB has been reviewing them, and we're going to hear from Andrew on that in just a bit. Quick reminder that you need to vote on any revisions before July 14th. And then for municipal projections, we'll need to vote before August 11th. And then the technical memo will be due next March on the 4th, about a year from now. Next slide, please. Yeah.
One of those dates has already slipped by. I don't remember getting a report to review even about livestock and other demands.
The livestock demand?
Yeah.
I believe that and we discussed that at the June meeting.
It was discussed at the June meeting. Yeah, I'll look back at the minutes. I didn't remember.
Yeah, it should be in the.
We'll go back and look at that.
But I believe the presentation is going to have info on the livestock demand.
Population projections are often, we talk about those a lot, and that's certainly where we're going.
Would you mind repeating that?
The population projection is also passed by another discussing
Yeah, we don't have to do population until January next year.
Oh, sorry.
It was really just because I missed.
So carried that 2022 down one more. My bad.
But population projections will be needed to be voted on by August of this year.
Okay.
And we're gonna have a whole presentation on that in just a minute. Sorry, to move forward? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, next slide after, yeah, here we go. So some important considerations. We have an interactive dashboard that the board has created to show that projections data, and it's got great visuals. They did a really good job of presenting the data, and it's also downloadable in an Excel file format and methodology summary down to the web level. So great resource for anybody to use. Regions need to take action soon on non-municipal and municipal projections. We suggest scheduling designated meetings in upcoming weeks to achieve this, because those summer deadlines are coming up. And heads up that declining population data will be reflected in projections. We will be showing declining population data. We will not be holding it constant as has been done in the past. More on that later. And the board will be adopting projections this fall. Regions cannot use grant funds to make revisions after this. So after the board adopts it in the fall, the funding is gone to make revisions. So the time is now for revisions. Next slide, please. Sorry, I lost my place. So basically the board will be making those revisions in the fall, and we're going to be talking about it in a couple presentations coming up shortly. Next slide, please. All right, new requirements to the 2026 regional water planning cycle. So most of these are related to implementing legislation or addressing stakeholder feedback and including recommendations from interregional planning council. Starting us off with task 3, the water availability and existing supplies. This cycle, the technical memorandum and the regional water plan will need to document the methodology for calculating anticipated sedimentation rate. And this is to increase transparency on how those rates are calculated, and most groups are already doing this. Also, water reuse will be presented in a separate section of Chapter 3. Again, many groups are already doing this. And then for hydrologic variance requests, there's a new checklist that will be asking groups to fill out if there is a hydrologic variance request. And this is just a Word document that folks can fill out that answers questions that our water availability team needs to know in order to get the info to make those requests. It's intended to streamline the process and to make it more efficient, so there's less back and forth with the consultant. And it will also help us summarize this information to report the state water plan. Next slide, please. All right, so the next new item is the identification of infeasible water management strategies in the previous 2021 plan. So this is a new requirement that comes from Senate Bill 1511 from the 85th legislative session, which finished up in 2017. This task involves looking back at the 2021 plan and coordinating with project sponsors to determine implementation status and determine infeasibility of certain strategies or projects. So key things to be aware of here are infeasibility analysis will need to be completed prior to the tech memo deadline because the list needs to be included in the tech memo. And this list of infeasible strategies consider already starting the amendment process. So the amendment process takes a while. For example, it needs to be presented at a public meeting with 14-day notice, all before that March 4th deadline of next year. The result of this analysis needs to be presented at a public meeting where the Regional Water Planning Group presents the methodology for identifying potentially feasible water management strategies. And so we highly recommend getting that process started early. If the Regional Water Planning Group identifies any infeasible strategies in the 2021 plan, they'll need to be amended to either remove the infeasible project or water management strategy, revise to push out the online decade of the project, or potentially incorporate a new water management strategy or water management project. And the deadline to adopt amendments is June 5th of 2024. Next slide. So, kind of more clarification on what this means. So regional water planning groups need to review strategies and projects in the 2021 plan and coordinate with the project sponsor to determine implementation status and determine feasibility. So what does that mean? That means needing to review the status of strategies and projects that require a permit and or involve construction that are online in the 2020 or 2030 decade. And this is related to major reservoirs, seawater desalination, direct potable reuse, brackish desalination, aquifer storage and recovery, or out-of-state transfers, or in general, any projects that require significant resources and time to implement. Analysis is not required for strategies or projects that do not require a permit or involve construction. So we're really looking at those big projects that require permits and construction. So your smaller kind of conservation measures, not what we're talking about here. Next slide, please. Statute outlines that a project can be considered feasible if the sponsor has taken affirmative steps toward project implementation, which may include, but are not limited to, spending money on the strategy or project, or voting to spend money on the strategy or project, or applying for federal or state permit for the strategy or project. And you can see Exhibit C, Section 2.11 for more details on that. We did send out guidance on this in January. Happy to resend it if that email got boxed away. Feel free to reach out to me and I can resend it. We can talk more about that. Next slide.
I have a question on this
Yeah.
slide before we go. So the 3 bullet items don't include, they include requesting permits from state or federal and voting to spend money. Does that include then when like a board authorizes like a grant submission? Would that be enough to fill that requirement, meaning these entities are actively pursuing the dollars they need to implement?
I think so. The question to repeat is if the board recommends a grant submission, if that qualifies?
Whether state or federal?
Yeah, yes, that should qualify.
Okay.
Apologies, I am new to the job, so many questions I may have to relay back. Thankfully, my boss is here and she can quickly answer, but trying to learn as fast as I can. But thanks, good question. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. So, other new items in the 2026 plan. The new items for the technical memorandum, we have a summary of interregional coordination efforts to date, and these are based on recommendations from the interregional planning council. And this can include descriptions of liaisons you have in other bordering regions attending their meetings, or if you attend the interregional planning council meetings, or coordination on multi-regional effort projects and efforts, things like that. And we also will need a list of any infeasible strategies and projects that we just talked about. So that list will end up being in the technical memorandum. And then on task 5B, evaluation recommendation on strategies and projects. This was task 5A last time, and we have added guidance to address House Bill 807 from the 86th session that finished up in 2019. These were required in the last regional water plan, but the guidance is newly added to Exhibit C. Conservation water management strategies have been restructured this time to separate water loss mitigation from water use reduction strategies, and this is to help better report the data on water loss. We've been getting a lot of questions from LEDGE and from stakeholders on potential savings from water loss projects and costs of water loss projects, and to better kind of tease out that information and provide more direct information, we're going to be separating out water loss projects as their own thing. There's a lot of interest in updating infrastructure, and this kind of all ties into that. Those questions we've been receiving from the public.
Could you have someone explain to us the layman's difference between water loss mitigation and water use reduction?
Yeah, and I think we're coming up with this exact definition, right, Sarah?
An easy example for water loss mitigation is replacing leaking pipes. Water use reduction is just serving the water, like public education on water, the like the scheduling for restrictions.
Here in this region, let me throw two ideas at you. The El Paso County Improvement District undertook a concrete lining project on many of your channels to mitigate water loss. That would be a water mitigation project, correct? And then water loss, water use reduction would be something like water utilities use in their promotion of low water use toilets.
Yeah.
And that sort of process, okay.
I think the only exception is AMI, the advanced metering infrastructure will be water loss, correct? Yeah, so that's kind of, it seems like it should be in reduction, but they're defining it as water loss reduction. But yeah, fixing pipes, sealing canals, kind of fixing the water that's escaping the system. That's what we're calling water loss. And we're going to have more defined definitions of all that when we get to that. But great question, thank you. Any other questions? We'll move forward.
On the smart meter water loss, I can see how it's water unaccountability, because the smart meter accounts for water that the previous versions did not.
Okay.
Really? Wow.
The detecting leaks and stuff.
Just usage.
Yeah,
It's a better meter.
yeah. Your kids' 40-minute showers being calculated in there. I've heard lots of great articles of parents finding out all kinds of stuff about what's going on at home with the smart water meters. Anyway, I digress. All right. So there's a new subsection to document implementation status of certain water management strategy types, and we plan to provide a table template for this text. So more information on that to come. And next slide, please. Okay, drought response. So something else new to this cycle is drought response information. We have added guidance to address House Bill 807 requirement on unnecessary or counterproductive drought response measures. This cycle rules were amended so that the regional water planning groups can identify rather than recommend drought response triggers and actions. New guidance to optionally address droughts worse than the drought of record. A new subsection is required to address how regional water planning groups may be addressing uncertainty and droughts worse than the drought of record if applicable. And what additional measures are measures not included in the plan that could be available during the drought worse than drought of record. So we're trying to make this clearer in the plan so that we can better report what regional water planning groups are doing. And it's intended to be a high-level exercise, and more guidance on this is in Exhibit C.
Here's a question for us to.
All right.
Okay. You're down in the Trinity Aquifer,
Yes.
right? You got lots of water. We don't have any water out here.
Yeah.
And we're the only water planning group that really addresses drought in the entire state. Can we have some extra help on this? Like you're throwing in a bunch of things about worse than drought of record, comments that seem to be needed in the document, the final document.
There should be some funding behind that.
I'm sorry?
There should be some funding behind it.
Some help, yeah. I mean, we're the only water planning group that has a drought to worry about, right? The rest of them have water. So
Drought is over that position.
I mean, it's pretty dry here.
Actually, there's a lot more drought in this state than just here.
Yeah.
Honestly.
No,
But I know what you're saying. We do need some additional help too, but there is. I have my sons around San Angelo and they are bad.
I was just there.
But we've been in since 95 drought. Right.
So when you say assistance, do you mean financial assistance or more support from the board?
Even just technical assistance, I'm thinking in the construction of this section, from our point of view. You know.
We got paid from the state on top of this, right? So I'm not sure exactly what happened, but we'll have better sense of how to define drought and what triggers should be, what triggers additional actions. I assume that state climatologist, when he's going to offer assistance, it's going to be granular, it's going to be.
Here's some data to use for your analysis.
But the resolution is specific to us and not state law.
I'm not sure what it's going to look like. It's still involvement. This particular task for the drought management and drought on record, we have developed a template for pensions to use. So we're all working on that task and you can like coordinate with us for assistance and how this is happening along the way. Probably working on a little bit later that we can help out with.
It was really that last paragraph of that section, I'm going to maybe subsection is required to address how our group is addressing uncertainty and doubts and droughts worse than drought of record.
At a high level, it can be a text summarizing what the region is doing and laying out the single template. It doesn't need to be, not expected to be an additional reason task. It's just, we have a lot of scrutiny from the legislature on this topic, and we need to report from agencies, we need to report these, the water plan, and report to the legislature, and it's not clear in all region plans what is actually being done. We need to do that really deep. We want to make it more transparent, and everything on this topic we want to do.
I guess what I'm asking openly for everyone's input is maybe we need some suggestions on how to address the uncertainty.
We have like examples in there.
Exactly.
Yes, we have that in there. If there's heavy drought,
It's okay.
Well, yeah, but we should do more building permits, I mean, no more water taps, that sort of thing could be a point of discussion, and that's the set of suggestions that I'm thinking are going to be brought with all sorts of comments from the public and also from the group.
I do have a comment, and I think it's very timely with this slide. So both the El Paso Irrigation District and then the Maverick County Irrigation District, which is outside of our, technically right outside of our region, right around Amistad Reservoir, they both encountered issues in the last water planning cycle where we actually had droughts of record that were droughts that were worse than the drought of record. And so in response, for example, in El Paso, for the El Paso Irrigation District, what the Texas Water Development Board did is they recalculated all of the irrigation water demand in our region because for one particular set of years when we had a massive drought in New Mexico and in Colorado, the amount of water that was available allocated for this region at Elephant Butte Reservoir was way below even historical averages. It was an anomaly.
That's a good example.
What ended up happening is that we had to recalculate all of our water management strategy, and it also had impact. I'm not the one to talk about this anymore, but in the Supreme Court case, it had an impact there, where the irrigation district was relying on more than 250,000 acres of water demand for irrigation in this region, and then all of a sudden that was bumped down to 143,000 acres. That had some real repercussions. And so I'm glad that that's there. It allows us to prepare for it. Same thing with Maverick County, south of Amistad, essentially Mexico, because the drought wasn't delivering the water that we're supposed to. This was because of drought, but then these are international treaties that we have no control over. Nevertheless, because of those lower water levels, the Texas Water Development Board opted to make changes to water demand when these are like politics, not necessarily nature.
Yep.
And so that's something that certainly needs to be included in this planning process. And we want to be upfront when it comes to new policy being implemented by the board and by the legislature and how it's actually impacting our regions ways beyond what it's originally intended. Because I think that's supposed to prepare us for drought, right? For us to develop strategies to activate them when necessary. But your change in policies actually adversely impacted our regions because you all, without even truly consulting the region, you all made changes to your water demand estimates. And so I'm hoping that we can take some time to focus on that area to avoid it happening in the future.
Yeah. This is further along in the cycle, so we're gonna deep dive into this coming a couple years, but just a heads up, this is new. Great conversation. Thank you for the comments and questions. I'm almost done. If we're ready to move on from this topic. Okay, more to come.
Heather,
Yes.
sorry. So I'm joining virtually and I have my hand raised, but I'm not sure if that can be seen. Before you move from this slide, I just wanted to assure the planning group to offer some peace of mind. We have been, if you don't mind going back to your previous slide, I'm sorry. Historically, we have been collecting all of the drought contingency plans. And so we've been using their drought response triggers and actions. So identify rather than recommend. So we have been identifying drought response triggers and actions in our Chapter 7 based on the data collected from each entity in the region who are writing and providing those drought contingency plans. And along with what Omar said, the easiest way to address potentially a drought worse than the drought of record is to look at historical data within the last 10 years, and we can even go even further. But you're going to see Andrew present here in a minute when he does the WSP update that we've taken that into consideration when it comes to our non-municipal water demands, is that we've looked back in time 10 years to pinpoint where we had the max use. And typically that happens when we're sitting in a drought. So we'll get to all that, but I just wanted to provide that insight that this new requirement doesn't actually add a lot of extra work to some of the things that we've already done for our regional water plan. So just rest assured that when we get to this task, we will be in compliance with the board and adding and enhancing our existing water plan.
Thanks, Jennifer. And you did have a tiny little hand on the screen. I just didn't see it. Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and move on. Thank you. So for implementation, we have reduced the content of the implementation survey. We've added guidance to address House Bill 807 requirement on achieving economies of scale. So this is a bit more detailed than last time, and we'll be providing data to help with this. And then finally, task 10, plan adoption and deliverables. Initially prepared plan and final plan must be documented in the regional planning group's inter-regional coordinating efforts. So again, this means if you all have liaisons attending bordering regional meetings, or if you've attended inter-regional planning council meetings, these all kind of count in the description of coordinating efforts under this item. This cycle, the state database report can be included in the initially prepared plan and the final plan via hyperlinks to the TWDB database report application. So no hard copies are required. If you still want to provide hard copies, you can, but hoping to save you all some time and money and just do the virtual option. The links will allow public access to the most recent data. Next slide, please. All right, so some quick, this is my last slide. Important reminders, requirements to complete the infrastructure finance survey and project prioritization have been removed to implement House Bill 1905 from the 87th legislative session that ended in 2021. And due to this removal, the 2026 regional water plan will just have 10 chapters. Reminder that on the 6th planning cycle webpage, you can find a copy of the amended scope of work that includes all tasks, Exhibit C and Exhibit D guidance document, as well as a summary of major changes in Exhibit C. I know that was a lot of information. Thank you for listening. Any questions at this point?
No questions, but feedback. You did excellent.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, now we're going to hear from Katie. Yeah, so now we're going to hear a deep dive on these projections data from our own Katie Gelber, and she's joining us on the line.
And we're moving to agenda item number 12, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
If Katie wants
Great.
to share the screen.
Yeah, is that okay if I do that? Let me. All right, are you able to see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let me start this slideshow. Okay, so as Heather said, my name is Katie Dahlberg. I'm the manager of the Projections and Socioeconomic Analysis Department, and I work with Heather and Sarah in the Water Supply Planning Division at the TWDB. And today I'm going to talk about the projections methodologies in the 2026 regional water plans. So I'm first going to cover the projections process and touch briefly on that data release schedule. And then I'll do the deep dive into the non-municipal water demand projections, population, and municipal water demand projections. So friendly reminder of the projections process. TWDB, that's my staff, we draft the projections using statewide methodologies. We share the data with the regional water planning groups who review and submit revision requests using Exhibit C as guidance. We'll work closely together during this process to develop a final set of projections, which then we'll take to our board. Once the board of the TWDB adopts the projections, any changes thereafter will go through a separate amendment process. So Heather shared this timeline with you guys. The first 3 items, those dates are when we share data with the planning groups. The 2 items really to note here for the projections purposes are those 2 that are labeled due. And so we are asking that regional water planning groups submit revision requests for non-municipal demand projections by July 14th of this year. And the very next month, submit revision requests for population and municipal water demand projections by August 11th of 2023. So for all non-municipal water demand projections in this planning cycle, the historical data that we use to draft the demands is 2015 to 2019. And then in this planning cycle, we are projecting 2030 through 2080. So for irrigation, the historical data is developed by the TWDB's Ag Conservation Department. They use the USDA Farm Services crop acreage data, and they also collect water use data from the TCQ water masters, irrigation districts, groundwater conservation districts, and river authorities. For the projections this planning cycle, we're using a 5-year average from 2015 to 2019 as our baseline. And the baseline is just the starting point, like where we start the projections at. So in this case, 2030 is our starting point. And then water sources in this category include groundwater, surface water, and reuse. We are applying the same projection methodology that we used in the 2021 regional water plans. 2030 through 2080 will be held constant, except in counties where the groundwater availability is less than the groundwater portion of the demand projections. In those counties, the irrigation demands will decline at the same rate as the groundwater availability. And we developed and shared this data in August of 2022. And this chart shows we have the historical data 2010 to 2019 on the left-hand side. Then the solid red line is the demand projections in the 2021 regional water plans. And the dotted green line is the draft projections for this planning cycle. So as I mentioned, the historical data is developed by the TWDB's Ag Conservation Department. And they do work with local irrigation districts to confirm those water use estimates. And in the 2021 regional water plans, we used a 5-year average from 2010 to 2014, which was slightly higher than the draft projections 5-year average of 2015 to 2019 that we're using in this planning cycle. Because the total modeled available groundwater in Region E is higher than the projected groundwater demands, then our baseline is held constant. So that's why it's a flat projection throughout the planning horizon. But overall, as you can see, the draft demands in this planning cycle are pretty similar to the last planning cycle. So for livestock, our baseline is the 5-year average from 2015 to 2019. Historical water use is based on non-surveyed county water use estimates, which are developed annually using the USDA's inventory estimates and water use per head per day coefficients. We do survey aquaculture facilities through our water use survey, and we add those to the non-surveyed estimates. For the projections methodology, it's the same one that we used in the 2021 regional water plans. We are carrying over the same projection trend from the previous plan. And then because we are projecting through 2080 this planning cycle, we just carried over the 2070 value to 2080. And these projections were developed and shared in January of 2022. We did make some changes to the water use coefficients that we use in developing our historical water use estimates. So we updated dairy cattle, chickens, hogs, and goats starting in 2015, and those are highlighted here in this table. So on this chart, we see the historical livestock water use estimates, the demand projections, and the solid red line from the last planning cycle, and the dotted green line is the demand projections in this, the draft demand projections in this planning cycle. The main reason that you can kind of see there's historical variation in water use. We see 2010, 2011 are pretty high, and then it dips in 2012. This is actually due to USDA's agricultural census. And we continue to see a dip through 2015. Again, that's USDA's inventory estimates. And then you see that kind of increase in 2017. And again, that's USDA's inventory estimates. This decline in 2011, we're seeing that statewide in a lot of regions. It's in response to the 2011 drought, selling off of livestock herds. So this is kind of a common pattern we're seeing across the state. Overall, the demand projections this planning cycle are very similar to the last planning cycle. So in the manufacturing category, the baseline is the highest single year county level water use from 2015 to 2019, plus unaccounted for water use estimates. So we survey large manufacturing facilities through our water use survey, and then using the U.S. Census Bureau's county business pattern historical number of establishments data set, we can estimate water use for those facilities we do not survey. Water sources include groundwater, surface water, and reuse, and it is the total intake for this category. And we developed the projections and shared them in January of 2022. We are not using the same methodology in this planning cycle as we did in the last plan. In this planning cycle, since the first projected decade, 2030, is more than 10 years from the baseline water use data, we're applying the statewide annual historical water use rate of change from 2010 to 2019 to adjust the baseline value to the initial year of projections, which is 2030. This is to account for potential changes in manufacturing production and water use that may occur between the baseline or historical water use and that first projected decade. And then to project over the planning horizon, 2040 through 2080, we applied the county business patterns historical number of establishments statewide rate of change from 2010 to 2019 to account for future changes in water use. And we applied this linearly. So let me show you what this looks like. In the last planning cycle, we projected an increase from 2020 to 2030, and then we held the projections constant for the remainder of the planning cycle. We're not doing that this planning cycle. We're projecting a linear increase. So you can see that in the dotted green line. Those first couple of decades in the planning horizon are very similar this planning cycle as they were to the last planning cycle. But then due to the new statewide methodology change, the manufacturing projections in the later decades are a little bit higher than they were in the last planning cycle. So in the mining category, we conducted a study in partnership with the U.S. Geological Survey and the University of Texas Bureau of Economic Geology to update the 2011 study that BEG had conducted. The current study provided a comprehensive and quantitative assessment of mining water use in Texas. It reviewed historical water use estimates and developed demand projections for oil and gas, aggregates, and coal and lignite mining for all counties in Texas. These projections are the draft projections for the 2026 regional water plans, and they were shared in August of 2022. There is more information available on our website, including the final report that BEG developed, as well as a recording of BEG's final presentation. The projection methodologies that they used in the study for oil and gas, they used a technique called total recoverable resources. And so they look at the entire amount of reserves that can be mined, and then using well inventory, volume of water per well, and average number of wells drilled each year. So that's based on historical data. They can just kind of reverse engineer at what point we can mine these resources. And they just distributed that over the planning horizon based on those historical trends. Then for aggregates, they assumed that water use would follow the same trends as population growth. And then for coal, there's only a few coal mines in the state of Texas. Each coal mine is tied to a coal power plant. So they looked at the life of the mine or the life of the power plant. So in Region E, we are seeing increasing water use since 2014, and this is mostly due to oil and gas water usage. So the draft demands this planning cycle are higher in order to reflect that recent increase. And then breaking down the mining projections by 2030 and 2080, the oil and gas projections are the same across the planning horizon, so 10,000 acre feet. And the aggregates are projected to increase from 2,000 to 3,000 acre feet. For steam electric power category, the baseline is the highest single year county level water use from 2015 to 2019, plus estimated water use for facilities that don't respond to our survey or any new proposed fossil fuel facilities. We survey steam electric power facilities through our water use survey, and then using the U.S. Energy Information Administration's database, we can verify which facilities we should survey, and we can also verify any new proposed facilities or any retired facilities. So if a facility retires all of its generators before 2020 and they stopped reporting to our water use survey, we removed their water use from the demand projections. And Region E did not request any facilities to be removed in the last plan, but just wanted you to know that our methodology was if a region had requested in the 2021 regional water plans to remove a facility from this category, we carried over that request to this planning cycle. Water sources in this category include groundwater, surface water, and reuse, and this is the consumptive use. 2030 through 2080 is held constant, and it's the same methodology we used in the 2021 regional water plans. The draft projections were shared in January of 2022. In Region E, only El Paso County has steam electric water demands. There's 4 facilities. The maximum historical water use was slightly lower from 2015 to 2019, the years that we were looking at in this planning cycle compared to the last planning cycle. There were also not as many proposed facilities in the region. So that's the primary difference for the difference in the 2 demand projections. So moving on now to the municipal. So for municipal category, we're looking at the historical data from 2010 to 2020, and these are the 2 decennial census. And then of course, we're projecting 2030 through 2080. And in this category, kind of embedded within it, are 3 main variables that I'm going to go through, which are the population projections, baseline gallons per capita per day, and the plumbing code savings projections. So we start with county level population projections, and it is important to note when we talk about our population projections that they only account for permanent residents. So we're not including tourists or part-time residents or kind of transient population. It is a permanent population. And they are just one factor of the municipal demand projections. So we draft population projections using county level projections developed by the Texas Demographic Center, or TDC. TDC uses a cohort component method relying on birth rates, death rates, and migration rates for different demographic cohorts. So they look at age, sex, race, and ethnicity. In their latest projections, they used migration rates from 2010 to 2020, which are the two decennial census, and they produced two migration scenarios, a full migration, which is called the 1.0 scenario, and then they take that migration rate, cut it in half, and that's the half migration, or the 0.5 scenario. The TWDB has always relied on the initial TDC county level projections. In the past, the TWDB altered the projections for the regional water plans in certain counties to hold them constant instead of showing declining population projections. For the 2026 regional water plans, the draft county population projections will follow the same trends projected by the TDC, including declines. So we start with these county level population projections, and then we have to distribute that to the water user groups. And we look at the both the historical county level population from 2010 to 2020, as well as the WUG's historical population from 2010 to 2020. And then we can apply either share of the growth or share of population. That's how we sub-allocate, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. There are some WUGs, military bases, prisons, universities, that they're not going to grow in the same way that other WUGs will. So their population is held constant throughout the planning horizon. And of course, we are projecting 2030 through 2080. So water user groups are defined in the Texas Administrative Code, and they are based on the utility water use of 100 acre-feet or more. Last summer, you may recall, we went through the process of developing the WUG list that will be used in the 2026 regional water plans. So all WUGs from the 2021 plans were carried over. And then new WUGs were evaluated based on the utility water use from 2015 to 2019. The only change was that we are not doing the sub-WUG option in this planning cycle. This resulted in 29 WUGs in Region E, municipal WUGs, and 7 of those are county other WUGs. So in order to develop the WUG's future population projections, we have to look at the historical population and the growth rates. And we do this by overlaying the WUG boundary on top of the census block data that we get from the US Census Bureau. So I have a screenshot, an example of Marathon Water Supply and Sewer Service. This WUG, it's outlined in blue, the WUG boundary, and then the census blocks are the little tiny squares outlined in black, and the numbers within each census block represent the number of people living there. So then we can just count the number of people within the WUG boundary. We also cross-reference the data that is self-reported on the water use survey when we develop our final population estimates. And we shared this data when we created the WUG list back in March of 2022, and then any changes to WUGs we did update, and we shared the data again in January of 2023. And so we reviewed this historical population growth rate at the WUG level as well as the county level in order to develop those WUG level projections. So just comparing the two population projection methodologies from the 2021 plan and the 2026 plan, both are utility-based planning. So we're looking at the water utility boundary. Both rely on historical data from the US Census Bureau. However, the years are different. So in the 2021 plans, we were relying on migration rates from 2000 to 2010, and the projections were actually carried over from the 2016 regional water plans, which relied on the TDCs, or Texas Demographic Centers, projections developed in the year of 2012. And in this planning cycle, we're using migration rates from 2010 to 2020, and they are new projections based on Texas Demographic Center's projections that they developed just last year. We are not holding declining counties constant anymore. We are showing actual population changes within counties. And then, of course, planning horizons are slightly different, 2030 to 2080 this cycle. So in this slide, I have the counties and Region E. This is looking at historical data, 2000 to 2020 populations, and El Paso is on the next slide. And so you can see El Paso's populations counts from 2000, 2010, and 2020. And then these are the draft population projections based on the 1.0 migration scenarios. So as I mentioned, we did share at the county level 2 migration scenarios, the 1.0 migration and then the 0.5 migration scenario. We can develop WUG level projections using the 0.5 migration scenario. If you would like, you can request them from us. So as I mentioned, there's 3 variables, and when we're talking about municipal demand projections, and so we just talked about population, and so now we're going to talk about gallons per capita per day. This is the second variable. Baseline GPCD is supposed to represent dry year using historical data. GPCD represents water use for the entire municipality. So it's that permanent residential population as well as commercial, institutional, and light industrial water use. Heavy manufacturing is taken out, and that's included in the manufacturing category. But in the municipal category, it's both residential water use as well as that commercial, institutional, and some industrial. So for the baseline GPCD, there's kind of one starting point GPCD that we use, and we drafted that by carrying over the one from the last plan and then accounting for passive savings. So we did this by reviewing the plumbing code savings in the last planning cycle and then subtracting that from the baseline GPCD used in the last planning cycle. We did share historical GPCDs 2010 through 2020 by WUG with the planning groups. And I do encourage you to take time to review those baseline GPCDs, review the ones we drafted and also compare them against the historical data that we shared. So the very last variable in the development of municipal demand projections are the plumbing code savings. These are also called passive savings or water efficiency savings. Plumbing codes are laws that mandate the water efficiency of appliance and fixtures, and we developed new plumbing code savings projections this cycle. And so those include residential toilets, shower heads, and clothes washers. And new this cycle, we projected passive savings from commercial toilet and urinal water efficiency savings. So these savings, they're included because they are passive savings that account for just natural savings as people and businesses adopt more efficient appliances and fixtures in their homes and in their businesses. They will just naturally start using less water. And then these are projected 2030 through 2080. And so this is the formula we use to project municipal demand. So for a given decade, we take the population projection of that decade, multiply it by that baseline GPCD minus the projected plumbing code savings, and then times 365 to put it on an annual basis, and then convert it to acre feet. And these are the draft demands this planning cycle. Looking at, we've got the historical water use 2010 through 2020, and the demands in the last planning cycle, and then those draft demands this planning cycle. These are based on that 1.0 migration scenario. And so, of course, some of the differences are due to the updated population projections, new baseline GPCDs and those new plumbing code savings projections. It's just a recap, kind of for your knowledge, so you can see all together the water sources that we include in each of the water use categories. And all of our data is available online. I think Heather mentioned this, but we do have everything in an interactive format in dashboards, and we also have it available in Excel spreadsheets, and our methodology summaries are available online as well. And that is my last slide.
Jeff has a question, but can you repeat it in case they can't hear from over there?
Sure thing.
Can we go back to the Region E municipal demand projections graph, please?
That's an
Yes.
It seems like a big change. Could you explain the implications of that?
Yeah, so the major changes come from updated population projections. That's one of the primary reasons for the difference. And then also it would be baseline GPCDs, and then the projected plumbing code savings are higher this planning cycle for most WUGs than they were in the last cycle.
So I understand how you got there, but I want to understand the implications. I mean, you're suggesting that we're not going to go up with demand at all. Am I reading this right? It looks like.
Yes, there are several counties in Region E where we are, where the Texas Demographic Center has been projecting declining counties, declining population.
I find that hard to believe.
Well, Jeff, let's spin off on your concern. If you look at the historical data that we have here, the water use survey, it was jumping up at the last point just before 2020. And it's sort of showing a trend towards the red line, not towards the blue line. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And even reality, the water use surveys would tell us that we're going to be needing to plan for a red line rather than a constant blue line. So are we interpreting this correctly?
Well, I see kind of a downward trend from 2011 to 2019 in water use. There is one spike in 2020, but there is kind of overall from 2011 to 2019 kind of a decline.
That's a stochastic event, and we all know that communities don't get small. They grow, even the little ones. And you're looking at one blip of the data. That's what it looks like to me. They never get going good. That goes out how many years?
50 years.
A lot of years. It's just silly to suggest that our water rate is not going to go up in that time. And I don't, the implication is what I'm trying to say. How important is that? So weird.
I would compare that to the agricultural demand, because those are the two groups that need water, or drink water. Excuse me. We've got people, we've got plants, and I don't see agricultural use diminishing much.
That's a very surprising graph, and I assume we're going to be talking about it more and probably arguing about it more in the future. I don't have to say it.
I have another comment. So especially El Paso Water, because I think they're the ones that are going to be biggest impacted by this graph. They've invested millions of dollars in being able to meet future water demand for a scenario in 2070 that equates to 217 acre feet per year. They bought land in Del City. Then all of a sudden, and it was a requirement, right, for them to be able to plan and make these investments and purchases in advance. All of a sudden, our water demand is at zero or negative. What happens to those investments? How can we, as public stakeholders, tell our taxpayers and ratepayers, we made all these investments, but then Texas Water Development Board said, we changed our mind.
We didn't really need it. Yeah.
And so I think there's going to be some serious debate on this methodology, especially because in your earlier graphs, you're showing population growth. And I understand the reasoning, whereas things are becoming more efficient, right? Appliances, water use is actually decreasing. But this is a huge disconnect that's going to have some serious repercussions. I can't imagine a public meeting where I'm having to tell my stakeholders, hey, El Paso Water, you know those $50 million you got from SWIFT that Texas Water Development Board is getting interest payments on? Yeah, those weren't needed. I mean, that's crazy. So I'm hoping to revisit this conversation and the methodology, because I think at least this region's gonna have some words to say.
And I just, I have a larger issue. It seems like every single one of your projections is a straight line. And I mean, like, yeah, for mining, okay, for industry, maybe, livestock, maybe, but for municipalities, that's just, that just boggles the mind. That one just really makes no sense at all. And especially, I mean, I understand some of the smaller counties are going down, but El Paso County and Brewster County are going up. And especially with El Paso County's population rising, that just doesn't make any sense. I mean, even with all of the measures that El Paso County puts in place, and with, you know, the new plumbing code, there's no way that's going to offset that. Like, I have no idea. We just don't understand.
Ed, do you want to talk to this?
So, I have tracked the usage and population here in the district specifically. If you want to lead your line to it, we've grown to 3% since the district has grown. Water use has gone down. People are using less water. At some point, it's going to stabilize. And people are still going to take showers, and still wash things. At one point, it will flatten out. You try to put in the water use has gone down. Now, rates go up, so people can use less water because the water's going to spend so much.
We just recently, in the last 5 years, have had a rating. Before that, it had been 15 years, and still the water use.
Would you mind a little bit louder so we have us in here virtually?
We recently had some serious water increases thanks to El Paso Water rate increase, but we hadn't had one from between 2004 and 2018. Still, we've seen the population grow and the water use per capita go down. We don't implement any conservation measures for that reason. Number one, it's going to hurt us in the pocketbook, and number two, people are policing themselves somehow. We're trying to get a handle on it. I would like to think that it's the move from refrigerated air from refrigerated air. That's a big plus. So we need to adjust. The other is more efficient appliances, and then just people knowing that we're in the desert. It's a finite resource, and we need to conserve. We, per se, do not have conservation measures. We sort of fudge a little by saying that a rate increase is considered a conservation measure because it lowers consumption. But that's about all we've got. Everything else, people are either policing themselves or somehow the water rates of the water use is just going
So this is a line you can accept. That fits.
as far as the North Valley Water District.
So this is started back in the 80s.
85, we started our first water connections in 89.
There was about 110 gallons per capita. There's 65. So we've gone from about 110 per capita to 65
Per day.
per day.
Per day.
Okay. I mean, you look at the state, you know, when they ask you to use our theoretical numbers, like, we're not even close.
I think that Texas Water Department allows us to use 150 per person.
Wow.
Yeah, so you see the population.
Yeah.
In a scale, you see the population grow at 3%, but you're seeing water consumption going down. I said, it's got to flatten out at some point. People still.
What you're saying is the population increase will have an effect on the overall water use.
Right, you're using more water because, yeah, you got more people. The individuals are using less water.
Right, I mean, they're just conserving water. I mean, as our rates go up, and we don't raise our rates that often here with the district.
No,
We're still lower than El Paso Water. We're buying the water from El Paso Water.
we have to.
Just residents are spending a lot of water.
We don't depend on that data to be consistent throughout because it's crazy for us to say, okay, there's no more growth or more water projections for the next 50 years. We don't know what's going to happen. All we've seen is that it's been steadily going down and it's going to hit a bottom level somewhere along the way. And then maybe it will start tapering back down. Don't know.
So I can speak to that on the minimum GPCD, we implement 60. So if any WUG comes close to, if it hits 60, we don't let it go down any further than that. That is what we consider a floor for GPCD.
And that's where we're at, right?
Yeah, we're at 65.
Jennifer, did you have something to say, or is that from the previous one?
Okay, I think I heard my name. Is that correct?
Did you have your hand up?
I did, yes. So I just wanted to reassure the group that Katie's doing a really great job going through the methodology, and then WSP is going to present the 3 different scenarios that we've looked at pertaining to this data. We recognize that there's this big variance between what we adopted in our 2021 plan and what the population and water demand projections are in this draft 2026. And the WSP team has worked with the Water Development Board to consider 3 different scenarios. And through the presentation, we're going to kind of lead you to what our recommendation is. But I get it's a lot of information coming all at once. And what we hope to do in our presentation is kind of break it down into bite-sized pieces so that we can absorb the data that the board has provided us and then hopefully agree to a good path forward. So Katie, I didn't know if you were done with your presentation, but I just wanted to make sure the group knew we were on our way to a deeper dive.
Yes, I'm finished.
Okay. Say that our farm in Marfa and Stevie was good on water as well as that. Well, we do too, because we don't have as much water as people think as well. That's a lot. Still water in the river. We're saying obviously.
I'll take the brewers.
All right.
The banquet water.
So agenda item number 12, we're done with the discussion, do you think? Okay. Moving on to agenda item number 13, WSP presentation, review, discuss, and potentially take action on the different handouts and update on the regional water planning schedule, non-municipal water demand projections, and population and municipal water demand projections.
So just real quickly, I'll probably, unless Jennifer thinks otherwise, gloss over some of the components of this, just as an interest of time, but I also apologize. I was in Houston yesterday, different allergies and out here, as soon as I smell a creosote bush, I just start draining, so apologies for how I sound today, but
Smooth over as fast as you can.
Yeah. The purpose of our presentation today is to go through a quick update on the schedule, where we are, where we're going. Review of the non-municipal water demands, which includes irrigation, mining, livestock, manufacturing, and steam electric, as well as a review of the population and municipal demands. So, and then we can move through to slide 3. Yeah. So the funds now have been increased. So we have a total budget of $409,544. So everything that had TBD at the last meeting has now been determined. If y'all are okay, we'll keep jumping through it. Sure. So as part of the anticipated timeline of the upcoming work, the planning group's required to approve any revision requests for draft projections at a regular meeting prior to submitting the revision request to the board. So as you can see, it'll be a little bit of a busy summer for the Far West Planning Group here, July 14th. All non-mun projection value revisions are due back to the board. And by August 11th, all population and muni projection revisions are due back to the board. And then the far outlook in March of 2024, you're going to have an identification of infeasible WMSs from the 2021 analysis, as well as the tech memo to the board. Next slide just demonstrates the schedule of where we are. We're sort of here on the tail end of the draft projections, so just a visualization of what we just mentioned. So we'll go ahead and dive into the review of the draft non-municipal water demand projections, and we'll go ahead and start with TV timeout. And that will be right back. Yeah. So we'll go ahead and start with the irrigation water demand projection methodology. As Katie mentioned, there are no key changes from the previous planning cycle with regard to the irrigation water demands. This baseline methodology is the 5-year average of the annual water use estimates from 2015 to 2019. And we've held them constant between that 50-year cycle from 2030 to 2080. In any county, and here's a little caveat here, any counties where the total groundwater availability over the planning period is projected to be less than the groundwater portion of the baseline water demand projection, they're held constant for 10 years and then begin to decline depending on that groundwater availability.
So you give them the benefit of the doubt in the calculations, in the projections. You don't just cut them down.
Correct.
Immediately.
Everybody okay if I keep moving on? And then here's just kind of a visual demonstration of that. So each county has the 12 demand values shown. The orange represents the demand values from the 2021 plan for 2030 through 2080. And then the blue represents the board's projected draft irrigation demands for that same time period. And then now we're going to look at handout 1, which is for the back of your blue folder here. And we can go to the next slide, please. So essentially what we're demonstrating here is that, well, I'll just go ahead and say it. WSP recommends that the maximum annual historic water use estimates should be used instead of the proposed TDUB draft irrigation water demand projection. So essentially, we looked at the values and we picked the max. So it's the most conservative approach.
So what are your comments about Jeff's observations about the gap showing?
We'll get there.
Okay.
We'll get there.
Okay.
We'll get there.
Okay.
Sorry. Let's try and make it bigger. No. Just keep going on.
Okay, sure.
I'll leave it on.
Well, I'm ready to go to the next.
Okay.
So Andrew, can I add just a quick comment?
Sure.
Okay. So the planning group probably remembers that we've done this approach once before in a previous water plan where instead of just completely agreeing to the proposed water development board's draft values, we actually went in and ran an exercise as to what was the historical water use estimate between, and we did a 10-year block of time, and then we looked at the max use inside that 10-year block of time. So for example, if you go back to irrigation, because this will be a good place to just set this precedent because it's going to be that approach throughout the remaining slides. So if you look at handout 1, there's actually 2 parts to it. There's this table, and then there is a second page that shows you where did we get 1,974 acre feet for Brewster County? Where did we get the 55,482 acre feet for Culberson, so on and so forth. And what that second page is showing you is we pulled directly off of the Water Development Board's website the historical water use estimates between 2011 and 2020 for every county related to irrigation. And when we looked at that 10-year period, we could identify in which year was the greatest use. And in a lot of times, it's our 2017 drought, but in some places it's not. So what we're recommending is that we create a 2026 water plan that is very conservative. We are writing a water plan that is very drought focused. What will communities do when there is a drought and a shortage of water? We're building a story that says if we perhaps have to use the greatest amount of water in all of these non-municipal categories, we've planned in such a way where we're accounting for where extra water supply will be coming from. So in this situation, if we just use Brewster County as an example, you can see in our last plan, we said irrigation water demand was 2,006 acre feet. The board has actually proposed a value of 1,549, held constant. We went in and looked at what the max annual water use was based on all those surveys from 2011 to 2020. And the max use in that 10-year period was 1,974. This is helping us close that gap, getting us a little closer to what we had in our previous plan, and not just assuming that we're going to take the proposed value from the Water Development Board, but we're actually going to land somewhere on something that we have historically used during this period of time where perhaps we had a drought worse than the drought of record, right? So that's just the story behind this table and the following table in your packets for each of the non-municipal categories so that you can understand what our logic was and why we're comparing this historical value and recommending where it makes sense, perhaps that's the value we use as our water demand. Okay, I'll let Andrew run with the PowerPoint. He's doing great.
Everybody okay with that? Questions, comments, in the sense of questions, comments, concerns before we move on to mining? Okay. So the USGS granted funding to the board for a study on the mining use and projections. This was conducted in 2011 and 2012, and it's since been updated. But essentially, it's a comprehensive and quantitative assessment of mining water usage across Texas. And we're going to be utilizing that in the 2026 plan. And then it's going to be also a part of the next state water plan in 2027. And obviously there's the hyperlink if anyone wants to go dig in on that methodology. But similarly, we have the orange, which represents the approved values from 2021 for mining water demand for 2030 through 2080, and the blue represents what we're looking at for the 2026 plan, the draft mining demand from the same time period, or same proposed time period. And then those mining entities that voluntarily recorded or revealed what their water usage was.
I'm going to put it in PowerPoint because I don't know why. So just keep talking about it.
Yeah, so the next two slides are just the reported quantities of water used by the mining, or let me rephrase, mining companies who voluntarily reported their water use. That's what the next two slides are. And that does include reuse, in case anybody was wondering.
this is all building materials. There's no oil and gas numbers in here, no reports from any oil and gas operators.
Correct. It's all ag and cement. And again, it's
Does that mean the deadline milestone is full for 8 months of survey, or
I can't answer on their behalf.
we just don't, we just rely on people?
The voluntary process, correct.
Well, there's Carroll County, I didn't see that. Facility.
I can tell you.
Oil and gas, oxygen. That's on the, it's the specific.
Yeah, I mean, you do have Oxy, but
yeah,
they're the only.
I didn't know there was a second page. They're the only ones
that reported.
They're in Carroll County.
Yeah.
So I go to the next one?
Yeah, let's skip we can skip 2 because, yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry for that.
Oh, no, you're fine. So now we'll kick into the maximum annual historic water use estimates from 2011 to 2020 for mining. And again, we went through the same methodology process of evaluating over that 10-year period what the actual reported water use was for those mining operations. And again, we recommend using the maximum annual historical water use estimate instead of the draft TDOT mining water demand projection, but only for Jeff Davis and Tarrant counties. And the reason being is the max annual for Jeff Davis and Tarrant counties exceed the projected. And then for all the other remaining counties, WSP recommends using the proposed draft mining water. The only 2 asterisks there are Terrell and Jeff Davis counties.
I have a question.
May have an answer.
So we're just kind of throwing out all the numbers from the 2021 state water plan. They hold no water anymore?
Well, it's the 2022 plan, but.
Okay, sorry, 2022 plan. We finished ours earlier, and then y'all get it.
So Teresa, the way the board approaches that is they provide every planning cycle, right? New draft water demands for our non-municipal categories. And we do get to look at what we had in our 2021 plan. So for example, here in mining, for Brewster, it was 0 all the way across. Well, if we look at our proposed water demand from the Water Development Board for the current plan that we're developing, it's 56 acre feet in the first 2 decades and then 57 acre feet to finish out our planning cycle. And just because in most scenarios, our historical max use was giving us a more accurate depiction of exactly how much water was being used in that 10-year block of time, we went in and did that scenario for all of these. It just happens here in Brewster for mining, our max annual use is 4 acre feet less than what the board is proposing in 2030 and so on. You can see that equation. So we want to be able to grab that largest number, right? Because we're building that equation of demand compared to what our supplies are, gives us either a surplus or a deficit when we have to go create water management strategies. And we want to build a conservative plan that says we are accounting for the highest use that we can justify in these categories so that we're planning strategies accurately. If we don't use all that water, great. But if we happen to use the greatest value, we've planned a strategy to accommodate that. So it's not that we're kicking the 2021 values out. It's that new data comes in for each planning cycle and we're reevaluating that new data. But what's important is for us to show what we have used in the previous plan, and that's why you'll see the 2021 values in our table. So you have a way to reference let's say Culberson County. In 2021, we said mining was 506 acre feet, but Summer Webb and others have argued there's a lot more mining going on out there. And they've been able to capture that, so that value for our proposed new plan has grown exponentially to 10,000. So we always want to be able to capture the max use that's occurring in these areas so that we can accurately develop water management strategies. Does that help to explain?
Well, I guess I'm looking at it more with regard to the projections that you were doing earlier. And I'm just wondering, did the 2021 plan in any way have any part, the 2022 plan, sorry, have any part in those projections?
Okay, so great question. Just for awareness, we have a two-part PowerPoint slide here. We've got to get through our non-municipal, which is mining, irrigation, livestock, so on and so forth. And then we have to get to our population and our municipal projections. Yes, the 2021 plan did play a part in what we will be walking you through for the municipal water demand projections, because there's components there where the board is allowing us to look at modifying our GPCD value. And there's a 2021 GPCD value that didn't have any plumbing code savings. The 2026 draft values do. So we are going to be able to review the municipal side of things based on some of the data that the board has allowed us to consider options for how we want to move forward.
Okay, and Jennifer, I just want to thank y'all for doing this extra work, because I think it was pretty obvious that that there was a lot of incredulity, for lack of a better word, with the estimates from the Water Development Board, especially after, you know, you work 5 years on a plan and then it just seems like it did sort of get thrown out. And so thank you for what you're doing and for utilizing those in these projections.
Yes, absolutely. I hope the group knows that we really have the best interest of the planning group at heart. And when the data came in, the first thing we started to do was dig a little deeper into what our options might be, because there is definitely a gap. And you're going to see that as we walk you through the municipal. A lot of that's tied to population. We've got new census data this time around. That's going to be really hard to argue. But we definitely want to provide the planning group options that have comprised of us looking into this in great detail. So we hope we explain it well when we get there.
I want to be clear, when I was asking about the 2021 numbers, I wasn't talking about y'all throwing them to the curb. I was talking about the Water Development Board doing that.
I understood you. Yeah, I understood you.
Okay.
Okay. Just to clarify, 2022 state water plan, the 2021 regional water.
Yes.
Hey, Jen, are you okay if I finish through the non-municipal and then you or Juan take over at POP and municipal?
Yeah, I know you've got a flight to catch, so we can tag team as we get to that stopping point for you.
Sure. Is everybody okay with the, or okay as we can be for the time being on mining? Okay. And that will go ahead and move on to the laptop. Sure. So just to reiterate, there were no key changes from the previous planning cycle for the livestock projection methodology. So we did present this to the planning group in Alpine back in February of 2022. But we did not discuss the possibility of utilizing the maximum annual historical water estimates from 2011 to 2020. So, you know, essentially baseline methodology for the 5-year average and the decade-specific water use trends from the previous cycle were what we used for the baseline. And then a visualization of the effect of that. Any questions before we move to the handout for the last time? So similar, y'all, to the irrigation, we recommend using the maximum annual historical, yeah, yeah, oh, come back, come back.
I'll get down here.
Okay. The short and long of it is, WSP, we recommend using the maximum observed annual historical water use estimates for all counties instead of the proposed draft livestock water demand projections that TDUB presented. So again, it's a more conservative approach to the methodology. Everybody okay with that? So there are some changes to the manufacturing water demand projection methodology from the 2021 regional water plan. So the demands were projected linearly using the county business patterns historical number of manufacturing establishments as opposed to holding those projected demands constant. So based on the highest region county manufacturing water use in the most 5 years of data that we have available from 2015 to 2019 from the water use survey, that's what we used. So the water use survey took into account the max year calculation, which consists of the gross intake minus any sales to other entities. And then also that included everything, from treated effluent, brackish water, all your fresh surface water, all your fresh groundwater, etc. So it was all encompassing in that calculation, except for saline surface water. And then the visual representation in time for 2030 to 2080, from the 2021 in orange and the 2026 projections, or the 2026 plan proposal for 2030 to 2080 in blue.
What do you define as manufacturing? What do you define manufacturing?
What do you define?
Yeah.
Manufacturing, yeah, just manufacturing.
So you're building something?
Any sort of industrial process, yeah, that wouldn't fall under irrigation, mining, or.
Like here in El Paso, we've got the refineries that would probably do that. We've got Phelps Dodge. The maquiladora stuff that's done on this side of the border.
Even food production, anything that doesn't, that's water consumption that doesn't get captured in those other silos. It's an industrial process or commercial process with a production line or a product development that would fall under manufacturing. Katie, you probably have a definition for it, right? The board
Yeah,
has-
we use the North American Industrial Classification Codes, NAICS, and that's how we classify. There's like hundreds of them that get put into the manufacturing category.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the graph, one shows El Paso, graph in the county that get manufacturing. There's no businesses?
We're not saying that they don't manufacture, they just may not have a volume that shows up on a scale that would be representative of, there could be something there, but it's not.
If you look at the next page on this table, it shows that Culberson, has maximum annual 43.
Yeah. So it's just the represented scale.
It's just a big difference from El Paso that has 7,100.
So in fact, that's a great transition. So we recommend using the max annual historical water use estimates for Culberson County as opposed to what the board recommends. But we do recommend using the proposed Texas Water Development Board manufactured water demand values for El Paso County. Okay. Last one for the non-population related methodologies here. So steam electric, no significant changes from the 2021 plan. Based on the highest single year county water use from within the most recent 5-year data that we have, so 2015 to 2019, from the water use survey, that's the data that we pulled from. We did take into consideration near-term additions and retirements of certain power generation facilities. And then we also took into consideration holding the projected water demand volumes constant through 2080, which I think was what we did in 2021. And then again, there's a visual depiction of that. And El Paso was the only, that bar chart, and El Paso County was the only one that had the steam electric activities within the region. Or I should rephrase, reported steam electric demands for the region.
So how is El Paso County going to be reducing its demands by 2026 in over 2,000 acre feet per year? Is there some new technology that they're introducing that we don't know about publicly? Are they going to cut out one of their steam generators? Or reduce it?
Solar.
I mean, that's a great question for
Well, I mean,
El Paso
sure,
utilities.
you've got increased population demand on the system. You need more electricity, typically, year by year. It's just interesting to me that we're using a 8153 when 2021 shows that we're using 10,500. And I haven't heard of a nuclear plant being built.
Okay, so part of my ignorance, is it steam electric or steam and electric?
It's steam hyphen electric.
Steam, which means what?
Katie, what?
Yeah, it's
Yeah, what
fossil
Katie-
fuel.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
so
right.
fossil fuel plants, biomass plants, those are the ones that use water in their process to develop electricity and sell it to the grid. So that's who's included for steam electric power. The actual real difference from the last planning cycle to this one is that in the last planning cycle, when we were developing the demand projections, which would have been in like 2015, 2016, the U.S. Energy Information Administration had proposed facilities in Region E that are no longer being proposed in Region E. So that's actually the difference. That's why the demand projections are different.
And we're supplying, I mean, doesn't El Paso Electric supply to the grid to a lot of the counties that are part of this water planning group? I mean,
Just El Paso.
Just El Paso, everybody else is ERCOT.
That's good.
Oh, are
And Culberson.
Part of the metro.
Yeah.
we, Hudspeth, and then the rest of them are all in another system?
Culberson too, so Van Horn.
Then everybody else is ERCOT.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, on that note, there are steam electric power plants in other counties. Is that what I'm hearing? Because that's not what we see in the U.S. Energy Information Administration database. But if that's the case, then we need to plan for them as well.
No, I don't think that's what they're saying, just that they get power from a different grid. It's in a different.
Yeah, so it's all, any facility, it can be on any grid, but we want to make sure we're accounting for the facility level water use.
I can make that a homework assignment for myself, Katie.
Just curious. Sure. That's all this is, curiosity, not criticism.
No, I like the input. I'm gonna have to punt to Jen and Juan. It was great to see everybody. I'll hopefully see y'all in June somewhere in the region. If I make it. Otherwise, I'll see you on that topic.
Thank you, Andrew.
Here, likewise.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks. Yep, we'll see y'all soon.
Likewise.
Okay.
And Jennifer,
Okay.
you're doing C, right? Population and municipal water demand projections?
I am, yes, thank you. So we're moving into our last agenda item. We created one PowerPoint so we can make smooth transition. So we're going to just be presenting our population and municipal water demand projections. It's new material that the Regional Water Planning Group hasn't seen yet. And along the way, we're going to try to hope to create a narrative of what we recommend our next steps be. So if you don't mind going to the next slide. Okay, so I am going to skip the methodology slides because I think Katie did a great job doing a deep dive into the population projection methodology. This is just a quick summary of what she's already explained. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide. So one thing to note, the population projection methodology had a two-step process. Step one, they kind of looked at this county level projection. They based it on the Texas demographic. Katie, what does the C stand for? Texas Demographic
Center.
Center, thank you. And they're looking at this component method that includes age, sex, race, birth rates, death rates, and migration rates. This will come in handy as we dive a little deeper into our data. There were two migration scenarios, a full migration and a half migration. You're going to hear me reference that a lot, and you'll get more and more familiar with it as I explain the PowerPoint. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide. And then the second step was looking at it at a WUG level. So how we suballocate that to our WUGs, applying the WUG historical, that 2010 to 2020 data, share of the region's county's growth to future growth. So I don't really want you guys bogged down in these bullets because it will explain itself as we look at it from a county to county basis. So I just really wanted you to understand that the census data given to us had a methodology to it. That process is very different than what we did in the previous plan. So understanding that a little bit is going to be helpful. Okay, next slide. Okay, so basically in summary, we got new projections. They came off of our census data. In that, there's two migration scenarios to be considered. Something to note is that when it's broken down by WUGs, the board looked at it as a full migration scenario and not for half. However, we can formally request, which we will recommend we do for our region, that they run our values at a half migration scenario, and we'll show you why this is important. So the board's giving the planning groups an option to revise that full migration approach to a half migration approach. And so as we walk you through the data, I'll talk to you about what WSP is seeing and what we recommend, but it's up to the planning group to advise WSP as to how you want to move forward. Okay, next slide.
I'm sorry, Jennifer, doesn't like the graphs.
Okay, no problem. I've got one on my other screen here. Okay, so while Annette is trying to figure out our technical issues, basically what you're going to see is a graph like we've shown in previous PowerPoints and in previous plans. And it's the orange bar with the blue bar, and it's giving you just a quick look at what was the population projections in our region and our 2021 plan compared to the draft population numbers being proposed in our 2026 plan. And I think this caught a lot of attention when Katie had her slide up, because what we're seeing is the difference between the two plans is that in each decade, region totals are proposed population projection values are less than what we had in our previous plan. And so perfect timing and net, there's the graph. And so the blue bars are our 2021 approved plan. Orange bars are the 2021 approved plan. Blue bars is the draft projections that we're considering and looking to revise for the 2026 plan. So it just is a quick visual aid to see the difference there. Okay, but we will need to dive deeper. So let's move into the next slide because this is where you can look at handout 6 and 7 in your workbooks. You should all be very familiar with the layout of this table. It's been in our plans for the past 5 planning cycles. Handout 6 is what we have currently in our 2021 regional water plan. These are our adopted and approved population projections by county by WUG. Handout number 7, so if you could look at them side by side, handout number 7 is the proposed projections with that full migration scenario, because that's how the board ran them for us for each WUG. And you can just kind of, if you're interested in Brewster County, you can quickly do a side-by-side comparison, and what you're going to see basically is what the bar graph showed you, and that is the values being proposed for our 2026 plan in most cases are significantly less than what we had in our 2021 approved plan. That's all I want you to kind of get as a takeaway. What we will then dive into is how we recommend kind of modifying and revising based on either a full migration rate run or a half migration rate run. So let's go ahead and move into the next slide. So I think Katie did have this in her presentation. Just regionally, if you were to look at all of Region E, you see that solid blue line is our 2021 plan population projection. And then you see that dashed red line is proposed population if we were to run it at a half migration. And then the solid red is if it's ran at a full migration. And what we're recommending throughout this presentation, regardless of which category we're talking to, is that we plan very conservatively. We plan expecting that in the next drought of record, we have accurately captured the max use, the max population, so that we're planning water management strategies for counties that may or may not, go out of their water supply. So let's just dive into each county. And this is where this information gets a little interesting and where we'll need the planning group's guidance on how you want to move forward. Okay, so first and foremost, we're going to ask the Water Development Board to run our WUGs with the half migration rate. In-house, we've done our own calculation. By doing that, we've been able to get a glance at how that data is going to play out by county in order to provide you a look at what we're recommending. So in Brewster County, if we ran the population with the half migration, you can see that we plan more conservatively by accounting for more people. Now, this does not get us to our 2021 population projection that we had in our previous plan. So in every county, you're going to see that there's a gap. We're hoping to kind of close that gap as best we can with the data we've been given. But as Katie probably provided in her presentation, we have actual census data for this planning cycle. In the previous plans, we had to run some estimates. So good estimates, not good estimates, it doesn't matter at this point. What we're seeing is that in our previous plan, we did the best we could with what we had, but we didn't have our census data. And so oftentimes we actually projected for there to be more than what the census data came in and said there actually was. So our way of negotiating that gap in between is running with the half migration rate, not the 1 migration rate, in all counties except for Jeff Davis, and that's where we see a little bit of an anomaly. Okay, so let's move to Culberson County, and these all are going to look similar. And the story behind it is basically WSP is recommending that we run with our population projections being ran at that half migration rate. That allows us to plan in a more conservative fashion. So there's Culberson, that red dash is that half migration. The solid red line is the full migration. We're asking the planning group to consider that we run with this half migration dashed red line. Annette, if you go ahead and move to the next county, I think it's El Paso. And it seems like the PowerPoint doesn't like us today. There's El Paso, not a big difference between the half migration and the full, but at the same time, we do get to account for a few more by using that half migration for El Paso. So that's our recommendation there. Hudspeth County, again, we're recommending that half migration run for our population projection. It's a more conservative approach. Jeff Davis, though, is where we have an anomaly. And yep, so I'll let Annette catch up. So there's Jeff Davis. So we'll pause here for a minute. Jeff Davis came in with the actual flip-flop of what I've been saying. You see that solid red line is the full migration scenario, and it is a more conservative approach than that half migration scenario, which is that red dashed line. And the reason for this, and I'm glad Katie's here because she can back me if I don't explain this well, but in Jeff Davis County, that county is comprised of mainly older individuals. In fact, it is the oldest county in the state. The median age for Jeff Davis County is about 59 years of age. So the way that the TDC does population projections, when you are dealing with a county that potentially has significantly higher mortality rate or low birth rate or both compared to that migration rate, then you see that projection line at a full migration scenario, at a half migration scenario drastically declines more than that full migration. So when the migration rate is halved, the population moving into Jeff Davis County can't keep up the pace with that high mortality, low birth rate. This is why that half migration scenario shows a greater decline in Jeff Davis than that full migration rate. Katie, I'm going to pause here because I know when I was peeling apart the data, this was something that really captured my attention. And I thank you for providing the explanation. But is there anything here that I missed that you would add to better explain why we're seeing the flip of that full migration rate versus the half migration rate?
No, I don't think I have anything else to add. I think you explained it really well. The demographics are a very important component when we're talking about the population projections. So I think you explained it very well.
Okay. So Janet, I can't see the group out there if you're on the phone, but I knew this would, create some red flags, raise those eyebrows, and I wanted to do a thorough job in bringing forth the justification for why, when we're recommending running with that half migration rate for the entire region, we are not recommending that for Jeff Davis County, and we did catch that, and we will be asking for the planning group to agree that the better approach for this county is to run with that full migration scenario. And that will be a part of our revision request back to the Water Development Board. So any questions here for Katie or for myself and Juan? I know it's a lot to soak in. We have a couple more counties to kind of look at, and then I'm going to push pause on the population discussion and see if the group's got any anything they want to add.
I just had a question on the y-axis. Is there a typo here? For the 1 and 1, there's supposed to be 1.5 there?
Heather, I can speak to that. So this graph, we normally just have like an Excel sheet that takes, we have just a drop-down menu, and I just didn't change the axes for these, but we have the actual numbers in the table that at least for the 1.0 migration scenarios in one of the handouts, and we can share the real y-axis values. I can just update the graph really quickly, but it was just an automated thing. That's why it looks that way.
Thanks, Mom.
Mhm.
Okay, Annette, let's go ahead and move to Presidio. So again, just at quick glance, we're recommending using that half migration. Allows us to capture, more people represented in that county. And the same for Terrell. If we go over to the Terrell slide, yep, there we go. Okay, so part of the story that we need the planning group to be thinking about in order to better guide WSP's next steps. We were given population draft data. It comes from the census, TDC. It was ran by both the full migration and the half migration. If we want to stick to developing a conservative 2026 water plan where we're capturing more rather than less, we are recommending that in all counties except for Jeff Davis, we go with the half migration. So that's not an action item. It's just a piece of the story that we will continue to build on when we go into water demands, which is our next few sets of slides. Water demands is based on our population. So in order to get to our final water demands, we will need the group to guide WSP on how you want to handle population. So I'm just kind of setting the stage. Okay, so water demand, there's an equation for how the Water Development Board comes up with water demands. We look at gallons per capita daily, that's that GPCD. We look at our baseline GPCD, that we hope represents our driest year. And that municipal water use is capturing residential, commercial, institutional, restaurants, hotels, camps, and transient population. That transient population is not included in the permanent residents. It is captured, however, with the GPCD use. Okay, so diving a little bit deeper into our water demand projections. Annette, if we go to the next slide. Okay, so that draft baseline that the Water Development Board provided in their data set was based on our 2021 Regional Water Plan. Then it got reduced to account for some passive plumbing code savings. And so that's what we're going to show you in this next slide is a comparison between plans. So, yep, that's the right one. So in that light blue shade, that's our 2021 Regional Water Plan with the GPCD values, of which did not include any kind of plumbing code savings. What we're trying to do with every water plan is enhance it and make it true and accurate. So we know that there's a lot of plumbing code savings going on in communities. So what we ended up doing is taking our 2021 values and we applied our plumbing code savings, which ended up being about 10%. And what you'll see here is when you apply that plumbing code savings, the GPCD value decreases. So there's that shift, and that shift is illustrated here with the light pink. Okay, so all we're saying in this slide is our 2021 values that we used didn't account for any kind of plumbing code savings. We know that exists and it's happening. We've applied it. So when we've applied it to our 2026 values, you see that shift. Okay, next slide. So much like our non-municipal water demand values, we're asking the planning group to consider a historical max GPCD between 2010 and 2020. So we've got 3 pieces of information, and we need to pick the best route or the best step forward. So on this slide and in your handout number 8, you have the 2026 draft GPCD values that the Water Development Board gave us. Then you have listed the 2021 GPCD values that didn't have any kind of plumbing code savings in them. And then we went in and looked at GPCD values between 2010 and 2020. And we picked out the year that had the max use. So by doing that, we're assuming year of drought, the usage there was true and accurate. It's what actually someone was using during that particular year. And what we're proposing is everywhere you see a yellow highlight, that's the value we're actually proposing we use as our baseline GPCD. So we're trying to capture actual use instead of a squishy value or instead of assuming some plumbing code savings, and use that in that equation to create our water demands. So in most cases, it falls inside that historical max use because we're picking up a drought year. But in some cases, it definitely falls into our 2021 plan. And so that's what that table is illustrating. One thing I will call out because it did jump out to my team and I, Lajitas Municipal Services, the historical use, that gallons per capita daily, it never came below 1,200 in that year of 2010 to 2020, and the max use was 1,745 gallons per capita daily. So that's not an anomaly. It's not an error in the data. We actually went in and looked at water use survey. It's likely that that WUG has some leaky infrastructure and perhaps is losing some water through their conveyance system. But that number is a lot larger than everything else on the table. And so I just wanted the team to understand that we did vet that. And it is a valid GPCD max use value.
Do you need a motion, Jennifer?
No, not, so when we get to the last slide and we do the summary, I'm going to kind of go back and cover where I need that action so that we know how to move forward. But thank you, Teresa. I do think by the time we close the meeting today, we will need to know which GPCD value the board or the planning group wants to use. But give me just 2 seconds to kind of cover one more slide, and then we'll kind of wrap up with what we want to take action on, and then what will come to the next planning group meeting with. So this slide, it had a title, just so you know, because I know it looks a lot like our population. This is actually an example slide to show water demand projections. So if we were to use half migration population and the GPCD max historical use for Brewster County, we would get a value for water demand somewhere in between what we had in our previous plan and what the board's recommending as our 2026 projected demand. Now, there's no action needed here because what we actually need to do is continue coordinating with the Water Development Board. We need them to run that half migration for all WUGs, and then we need to reassess our data. But I just wanted to show you, like the other slides, what we're trying to do is be conservative in how we plan. And in doing so, we need to look at which counties we're going to do the half migration and the full migration, what GPCD value, because those two components feed an equation that then gives us our water demands, and we really want accurate water demands. So let me wrap up, and then we'll kind of go back through where we need action, what your thoughts are as a group, and what we'll need to be bringing to the next meeting for you guys. So one thing we can do in part of closing out this meeting is approve our non-municipal water demands. So at the very beginning of the slide, we had some deadlines that we need to meet for the Water Development Board. And by July 14th, we need to have all our revisions in for the non-municipal. So our irrigation, mining, steam electric, so on and so forth. If we can agree as a group that you like the option of using our historical max use between 2011 and 2020 as our projected water demands, that is an item we can work with the board and get off our plate. We can submit our revisions and have the non-municipal water demands done, and we can just focus on our population and municipal water demands. So that's kind of summary bullet point number one is if the planning group is pleased with our consideration of max use and use that value where it makes sense. Now you saw in some counties, we don't recommend that. We recommend the board's 2026, but based on those first 6 or 7 slides, if the group is okay, allowing WSP to provide the board that approach, we can close out this agenda item.
Okay, I move to allow our consultants to use historical max use value where appropriate and in submitting our information to the Texas Water Development Board.
Second.
Okay, first and second, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Awesome, thank you. So we'll get that pulled together and get that out to the Water Development Board on your behalf. So the second thing we need to consider, because it will guide the WSP team on what our work is between now and the next meeting, is 2 parts. Where it makes sense, we use the half migration scenario because that allows us to plan more conservatively. There's one county where that full migration actually was the more conservative approach, and that was Jeff Davis. So if the group is okay with how we're going to address where we use the full migration versus where we use the half migration, we will then go ahead and work with the Water Development Board in alignment to that. That's part one. Part two is in order to get to our water demand value, we have to agree on the components to that equation. One component is that GPCD. And as we showed in that third to last slide, that handout where we lined up what was in our 2021 plan, what's being proposed in the 2026, and then what was our historical max GPCD use. Those yellow highlights kind of tell the story as to which GPCD baseline value we as WSP consultants would like to recommend as being that component to our equation for water demands. And then if that's the path we take, the one migration scenario versus the half, the larger GPCD baseline value, whether that's in our 2021 plan or that max use, we can then work with the Water Development Board to run the data needed for us to come up with our water demands. I can't show you those water demand values today because we didn't have your consensus on how you wanted to approach those 2 components to the equation. So we do need some direction there. And then what I hope to bring back to the next meeting is based on the direction you're providing us today, we can show you what those water demand draft values will be, and we can look at them in comparison to our 2021 plan.
Okay, then I'd like to move part one, that where it makes sense, we authorize our consultants to use the half migration scenario with the exception of Jeff Davis County, where that would be the full migration scenario. And then part two, to use the larger baseline value for GPCD and to work with Texas Water Development Board to run the data needed to bring back to us the water demand draft values at the next meeting.
Well played.
Second.
With the first and second, any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Aye.
Awesome. Thank you, Teresa. I really owe you dinner when I come out again because that was the best concise summary to data you got in 5 minutes. And we as consultants sat on it for several weeks. So that's amazing. So what we're proposing then is when we need to meet next. So if you go to the next slide, and this of course is, you guys need to tell us, we'll be flexible, but we have to have our revisions in for population and municipal water demands by August 11th. So what I'm proposing is a June meeting. I think that gives us enough time to take your recommendations for our path forward, work with the Water Development Board, and come back with the population and municipal water demand draft values. Then have you review that, walk you through our findings there, and still give us time to take action one way or another before we need to hit our August deadline.
Is Memorial Day? 29th? Okay, there it is. Okay. So I propose the first week of, or second week of June, whatever that is, starting with the 5th, so that's in there. 5th through 8th. Are we going to stick with Tuesday meetings?
It's up to you all.
Doesn't really matter to me. I can't do Wednesdays, but Tuesdays or Thursdays are still good.
I prefer Tuesdays because, Thursdays because Tuesdays are city council.
Good point. Okay. Then let me suggest that June 8th. How's that sound for you guys?
So June 8th is a Thursday. And for those folks who are participating virtually, our next meeting would be out in the region. And I know that as great as technology is, there are some limitations. And so I would think that perhaps if we're having it out in the region, then maybe we have that in person only. If I can't guarantee that everything is taken care of in terms of giving everyone the ability to hear as well as they need to. I know we had some problems at this meeting. So that would be my only proposal, is if we have the meeting on the 8th, it would be out in the region, but we probably would have to have that one in person only.
That's a good point. I concur. Why don't we try for Van Horn since it's closer to El Paso?
Okay. Are we okay with Van Horn, the virtual world?
I'm good with Van Horn, and if virtually doesn't work because we're out in the region, we'll have a representative there in person for sure.
Can we schedule it during a Blue Origin flight? That'd be pretty cool.
Okay, so June 8th, and I did change it to 1:30. I think usually it's at 1. Is it preferable to stay at 1 o'clock?
Well, that'll be 12 o'clock El Paso time, so we just need to make note of that.
Yeah.
No problem.
Okay, keep it at 1 o'clock instead? Central time? Okay.
That's
So
central, right?
June 8th at 1 p.m. in Van Horn.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, WSP doesn't have anything more. Thank you.
Before we adjourn, if I can really quickly, for again, those in the virtual world, thanks for hanging in there. We do just want to make an announcement. We have a retirement. Mr. Davis, would you mind coming up? Would you mind coming up here? That's what Mr. Barker said.
Well,
Well, I was told this, so hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn. Randy, don't get that. Randy, do you want to say a few words?
Yes, Sally's been at the water district since 1995 or 96, and he's no longer our board president. He stepped down, and he's resigning as my alternate now, and so I just wanted to let everybody tell him to thank him and congratulate him.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sally.
Wow.
So the expectation is that everybody else stays on board till they're 90, okay? All right.
Yeah.
Annette?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. And also, just for thank you, Mr. Davis, and also for the group, if we're having our meeting in June, if I can finagle my way to get Janet to come out just for some lunch or something, maybe we can take some time to recognize her as well. If I can do that, I'll schedule a lunch prior to our meeting.
And if you can
Because
get Chewy off of one of the islands, you know.
if we can do that as well, we'll ask Mr. Reyes as well. So we'll keep everybody informed.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Item number 16, motion to adjourn.
We forgot about public comments.
Oh, that's
Look
right.
at that, the public. I'm so sorry.
And then I've stuck my dates into my.
Just stay, everybody stay put so I can get that information, but public comment.
So item number 15, public comment. Anybody from the public want to address this board? Online, anybody? Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 16. So entertain a motion. Mr. Miller? Any further discussion?
Out of here.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Yes, and we do have cupcakes for those who are participating in person.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
That's what you get for not coming.
Albert, good to see you. I saw your brother a couple months ago. What are you doing?
I think we have to wait.
We'll stick those dates in our signs. Hey, Bill. So you still consider this? This is not my own card. This is my consulting card, but I'm a listing broker. And you met with John. This is recommended to American Bible. Okay. And I don't know what. I can see it. Okay. But anyway, there might be stepping up to he's stepping up. So I'm coordinating and then we'll just share with you I appreciate it. Nice to meet you. Thank you. Trent, last one. I think I'll show. I made a motion to approve you. Yeah, I saw You see, last one, I haven't followed up on it. Have you seen the first, it's kind of got a different vibe to it. He's not sure what he's doing there. And you know, I think, I anticipate, because I follow it. And, what I suspect is that they get promoted, and the subject matter is going to be, they want to stay up, right? They don't want to be relegated. So that's what that's going to be the big thing over. They have to create something else to stay Yeah, that's the bottom line. Exactly. It's good to see.
So you switched positions too? Yes, I am now at the city of El Paso. I'm working in the so I sort of left the water world and do a lot of volunteer work.
Mark, this is a graphic.
Retire or what happened? Retire. Well, I don't know. His friend was to retire. So I'm like, no, boss, you
Yeah, because I, all of a sudden, I just started, no. Yeah. Yeah. Really? I'll be darned. Yeah. I got too many positions.
Yeah, no, but he's happy.
Is he?
Yeah.
Good. Is he staying off now, most of the time, gone, Rio Dosa, or what?
I know he's in Mendoza a whole bunch, but I don't know what else he does. I mean, I only touch base for like once a month.